Chapter 1. The night she bled, the rain had turned the cobblestones black. Alara pressed herself against the alley wall, her breath coming in sharp, silent gasps. Her dress, the one she'd worn to her sister's funeral that morning, clung to her skin, heavy with water and fear. She could hear them behind her, footsteps that didn't quite match human rhythm, voices that carried too clearly through the storm. She saw the exchange. One said, "Male, come. We can't let her leave the district. Kale won't approve a public kill," another argued. "Not with the truce still holding. Then we make it look like the rain drowned her." Alara's fingers found the rough brick at her back. She'd only come to the old quarter because her sister's lawyer had an office here, some dusty room above a bookshop that smelled like mildew and old secrets. The will had been read, the debts had been revealed, and Alara, already hollowed out by grief, had left through the wrong door into the wrong street at the wrong hour. She'd seen two men in the courtyard below. One had handed the other a vial of something dark and luminous. Their eyes had caught the lamplight strangely, and when they'd looked up at her window, she'd known with a certainty that lived in her bones, that she was looking at something not human. So she'd run. Now the footsteps were getting closer. Alara pushed away from the wall and stumbled deeper into the maze of alleys. Her shoes, delicate things meant for mourning, not fleeing, skidded on the wet stone. She turned a corner and found herself facing a dead end, a courtyard enclosed by crumbling buildings, their windows dark and empty. Behind her, the voices grew clearer. "There," one said. She spun. Two figures stepped into the courtyard, their shapes cutting sharp silhouettes against the rain. The taller one tilted his head, studying her with eyes that reflected lamplight like a cat's. "You shouldn't have seen us," he said, almost gently. Alara's back hit the wall. "I won't tell anyone. I don't even know what I saw." "No," the second one agreed. "You won't." He moved faster than anything human should move. One moment he was across the courtyard. The next, his hand was around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Alara clawed at his wrist, her vision already graying at the edges. Then the world exploded into motion. Someone collided with her attacker. The grip on her throat vanished. Alara collapsed to the cobblestones, gasping, her hands flying to her bruised neck. Through the haze of panic and oxygen deprivation, she saw a third figure. He was taller than the others, dressed in black that seemed to drink the lamplight. Dark hair fell across a face carved from angles too perfect to be coincidental, high cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, eyes the color of winter storms. He moved like water, like violence made elegant. And when he struck the man who'd tried to kill her, the crack of impact echoed off the stones. "Enough," the newcomer said. His voice was quiet. It carried anyway. The taller attacker staggered back, blood too dark to be human dripping from his mouth. "Kale," he spat. "This doesn't concern the first house." Marcus was trading blood wine in neutral territory. The newcomer Kale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "That violates the accords. You violated them by hunting a witness on my grounds. She's human. She doesn't matter. She matters because I say she does." The silence that followed felt heavier than the rain. Alara watched, her pulse hammering in her ears, as the two attackers exchanged glances. Then, without another word, they turned and disappeared into the shadows with that same unnatural speed. Kale stood motionless for a long moment, rain streaming down his coat. Then he turned to look at her. Alara's breath caught. Up close, he was terrifying. Not because of violence, though she'd just watched him move with lethal precision, but because of stillness. He was too controlled, too composed, like something carved from marble and given just enough life to pass for human. His eyes settled on her, gray and ancient and utterly unreadable. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried. Her legs buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground, one hand closing around her upper arm with surprising gentleness. The touch sent a shock through her. His skin was cool even through the fabric of her sleeve. And there was a strength in his grip that suggested he could crush bone without effort. "You're hurt," he said. Her voice came out hoarse. She touched her throat, felt the tender places where bruises were already forming. "I'm fine." "You're not." He studied her with clinical detachment, then seemed to reach some internal decision. "Come with me. I don't even know who you are." "Kale Thorne. First house. And you're bleeding." Alara looked down. Her palm was scraped raw from catching herself on the cobblestones. Blood bright red, unmistakably human, welled in the creases. It wasn't much, barely worth noticing, but Kale's expression changed, for just a fraction of a second, Something flickered behind his eyes, hunger, maybe, or recognition, or something older than both. Then it was gone, locked behind that terrible control. We need to leave, he said. Now. Why? Because half the vampires in this district can smell you bleeding, and the truce doesn't protect humans stupid enough to wander into the old quarter after dark. He started walking, still holding her arm. And because if you stay here, you'll be dead before dawn. Alara let him pull her forward, her mind spinning. Vampires. He'd said it so casually, like it was common knowledge. Like the world she'd known her entire life, grief and debts and dreary lawyers' offices had just cracked open to reveal something vast and dark underneath. Where are you taking me? She managed. Cale glanced back at her. Rain dripped from his dark hair, and in the lamplight, his face looked carved from shadow. Somewhere safe, he said, relatively speaking. And Alara, who had buried her sister that morning, and learned she was penniless that afternoon, and nearly died that evening, realized she had no choice but to trust the vampire who'd saved her life, even if every instinct she had was screaming that safety was the last thing she'd find in his presence. Chapter 2. The House of Thornscale's home was not what Alara expected. She'd imagined something gothic and obvious, a crumbling manor with gargoyles and iron gates, perhaps, or a crypt beneath the city. Instead, he led her through a series of winding streets to a townhouse that looked almost ordinary. Tall windows with heavy curtains, a door painted deep burgundy, gas lamps flickering on either side of the entrance, almost ordinary, except for the absolute silence that surrounded it, as if sound itself had learned to keep its distance. Cale unlocked the door with an old-fashioned key and gestured her inside. Alara hesitated on the threshold, her scraped palms still throbbing, her throat aching where fingers had crushed her windpipe. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that entering a vampire's home was suicide, but the rain was falling harder now. And somewhere in the dark streets behind them, those other vampires were still hunting. And Cale had saved her life. She stepped inside. The interior was spare and elegant. Dark wood floors, walls lined with bookshelves, furniture that looked antique but well-maintained. A fire burned in the hearth, which surprised her somehow. She'd expected vampires to prefer the cold. Cale locked the door behind them with 3 separate bolts. Then he crossed to the windows and drew the curtains closed with methodical precision, checking each one twice. Only when he seemed satisfied did he turn back to her. Sit, he said, nodding toward a chair near the fire. Alara sat. Her wet dress squelched against the leather, but she was too exhausted to care about ruining his furniture. She watched as Cale disappeared through a doorway, moving with that same unsettling grace. Not quite human. Too controlled. He returned a moment later, carrying a small wooden box and a glass of water. He set both on the table beside her chair, then lowered himself onto the ottoman across from her, maintaining distance. She noticed, keeping space between them. Let me see your hand, he said. She extended it slowly. Her palm was still bleeding, though the rain had washed away most of the dirt. Cale opened the wooden box to reveal bandages, antiseptic, and other medical supplies that looked oddly mundane in a vampire's possession. You keep a first aid kit? She asked. Her voice still sounded raw. I've lived a long time. I've learned that injured humans tend to bleed on things. He pulled out a clean cloth and a bottle of something clear. This will sting. It did. Alara hissed through her teeth as he cleaned the scrape with efficient, impersonal movements. His fingers were cool against her skin, not cold exactly, but lacking the warmth of living flesh. He worked in silence, wrapping her palm with practiced ease. You've done this before, Alara said, more times than I care to remember. He tied off the bandage and sat back. The water is for you. Drink it. She picked up the glass with her uninjured hand and took a sip. It tasted normal, no poison, no strange aftertaste. Just water. She drank half of it before setting it down. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving me. For this. Cale's expression didn't change. Don't thank me yet. You're not safe. You said this place was safe. I said, relatively speaking. He stood and crossed to the fireplace, staring into the flames with his back to her. Those vampires tonight were from the 3rd house. Marcus, the one with the blood wine, has been violating the accords for months, trading illegal substances in neutral zones, feeding without consent, breaking every rule the houses established to keep the peace. The accords? Alara asked. The houses? Cale glanced over his shoulder at her. You really don't know anything about us, do you? I didn't know vampires existed until about an hour ago. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. too brief to be certain. He turned back to the fire. There are 5 vampire houses in this city, he said. Each one controls a district. Each one follows a set of laws, the accords that prevent open war. The first house, which I lead, controls the old quarter. We're the oldest, the most traditional. The third house controls the ports and trade. They're ambitious, ruthless, and bloodwine, a drug made from human blood mixed with certain catalysts, highly illegal, highly addictive to younger vampires. His jaw tightened. Marcus has been flooding the market with it. The third house denies knowledge, but I know their leaders sanctioned it. They're trying to destabilize the other houses, build power before the next council. Alara tried to process this. Vampire politics, drug trade, ancient laws. It sounded absurd, like something from a penny dreadful. Except her throat still ached from being strangled, and the vampire standing before her was very, very real. Why did they try to kill me? She asked. Because you saw the exchange. You're a witness, but I didn't understand what I was seeing. I still don't really. It doesn't matter. Kale turned to face her fully. In their eyes, you're a liability. And under the accords, killing a human witness in neutral territory is permitted if it prevents exposure. Cold settled into Alara's stomach. So I'm just allowed to be murdered? You were. Kale corrected. Until I claimed protection over you. Claimed protection? I invoke the first house's authority. As long as you're under my protection, the other houses can't touch you without declaring war. He paused. But that protection only extends as far as my power does. If you leave this district, you're vulnerable. If you're caught alone, you're vulnerable. And if the third house decides you're worth the risk of conflict, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Alara looked down at her bandaged hand. This morning she'd buried her sister. This afternoon she'd learned she was penniless, that her sister's debts were now hers. This evening she'd nearly been killed. And now she was trapped in a vampire's home, protected by laws she didn't understand. Caught in a war she'd stumbled into by accident. I can't stay here, she said. You can't leave, Kale replied. I have a life, a job, people who'll notice if I disappear. Do you? He studied her with those ancient gray eyes. Forgive me, but you don't dress like someone with attachments. That's a mourning dress. Recent loss. And you were in the old quarter alone at night, which suggests you either have no one who cares enough to warn you away, or no one left to care at all. The accuracy of it stole her breath. Alara stood abruptly, anger flaring hot in her chest. You don't know anything about me. I know you're alone, Kale said quietly. I know you're grieving. And I know that if you walk out that door, you'll be dead before you reach the bridge. Silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Alara wanted to argue, to insist she could take care of herself, but her throat ached, and her hand throbbed, and exhaustion was pulling at her bones. How long? She asked finally. Until the third house is dealt with. Until Marcus and his supporters are brought before the council. Kale's expression softened barely, but enough to notice. A few weeks, maybe less, and I'm supposed to just stay here with you? There's a bedroom upstairs. It locks from the inside. You will have privacy. He moved toward the doorway, then paused. I don't sleep at night. I'll be downstairs. You're safe here. Safe, Alara repeated. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Kale looked back at her. For just a moment, something human flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. As safe as you can be, he amended. Given the circumstances. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the house with that unnatural silence. Alara stood alone by the fire, listening to the rain against the windows, and wondered what kind of cage she'd just locked herself into, and why, despite everything, she didn't feel entirely afraid. Chapter 3. The hours between. Alara didn't sleep. She tried. The bedroom Kale had shown her was surprisingly comfortable, a 4-poster bed with clean linens, a wardrobe filled with clothes that looked decades old but smelled of lavender, a window that overlooked the rain-soaked street. The door had a sturdy lock, just as he'd promised. She'd used it, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt hands around her throat, saw those inhuman eyes reflecting lamplight, heard Kale's quiet voice saying you're not safe, like it was a simple fact, immutable as gravity. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up. She pulled on a dressing gown she'd found in the wardrobe, silk, old-fashioned, far too fine for someone like her, and unlocked the door. The hallway was dark except for a faint glow from downstairs. Alara descended the stairs slowly, her bare feet silent on the wood. She could hear something now, the soft rustle of pages turning, the occasional creak of a chair. She found Cale in what appeared to be a study. He sat in a leather chair near a reading lamp, a book open in his lap. He'd removed his wet coat, and in shirt sleeves and waistcoat, he looked almost ordinary, almost human, except for the absolute stillness. He didn't fidget or shift his weight, didn't blink as often as a living person should. Even his breathing seemed more like a habit than a necessity. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up from his book. Alara jumped slightly. "How did you know I was there?" Heartbeat. He turned a page. "Yours is faster than it should be." Frightened or thinking too hard, both probably, she hesitated in the doorway. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't." He finally looked up, his gray eyes catching the lamplight. "Come in. Pacing upstairs will only make you more anxious." She entered slowly, taking in the room. More bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes in what looked like a dozen different languages. A desk held papers covered in elegant handwriting. The whole space felt lived in, personal, unexpected somehow. "What are you reading?" she asked. He held up the book so she could see the spine. "Meditations, by Marcus Aurelius. In Latin, philosophy helps pass the time," he said. "And Marcus has useful thoughts on endurance." Alara moved closer, drawn despite herself. "You read Latin?" "I was alive when it was still spoken." He said it casually, the way someone might mention visiting another city. "Along with Greek, Old French, German, Russian, and a few dead languages you wouldn't recognize." The reality of it hit her again. This thing he was. Not just a vampire, but something ancient. He'd lived through centuries while empires rose and fell, while languages were born and died, while generations of humans lived their entire lives in the space of his memory. "How old are you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Cale closed the book. "Old enough to know that question rarely leads anywhere pleasant." "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have 1,300 years, he said quietly. "Give or take a few decades. I stopped counting precisely around the Renaissance." Alara sank into the chair across from him. 1,300 years. It was incomprehensible. What was it like, being turned? Something dark crossed his face. "That's not a story for tonight, but sit with me if you want," he interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "But choose different questions." Alara bit her lip, chastened. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain still falling beyond the windows. She studied him in the lamplight, the sharp angles of his face, the way shadows pooled beneath his cheekbones, the old-world elegance in the way he held himself. "You said I'd be here for weeks," she ventured, finally. "What am I supposed to do all that time?" "Rest, recover." He set his book aside. "You're exhausted, grieving. Your sister died recently." "How did you know it was my sister?" "You were wearing mourning dress. Too young to be a widow, too composed to be a child mourning a parent." "Sister seemed most likely." His gaze softened fractionally. "I'm sorry for your loss." The words were simple, formal, but something in his tone, some weight of genuine understanding, made Alara's throat tighten. "She had consumption," she said quietly. "Wasted away for months. By the end, she was so frail I could see through her skin." She looked down at her bandaged hand. "She left debts. Substantial ones. The lawyer said I'd have to sell everything just to settle half of them." "Is that why you were in the old quarter alone?" "I didn't know where else to go. Couldn't face going back to the apartment. Couldn't stand the thought of packing her things, selling her jewelry, watching strangers pick through her life." Alara's voice cracked. "So I walked, and I walked, and I ended up somewhere I shouldn't have been." Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and crossed to a cabinet, returning with a crystal decanter and 2 glasses. He poured amber liquid into both and offered her one. "Brandy," he said. "It won't solve anything, but it might help you sleep." Alara took the glass. "Do you drink? I mean, besides blood?" He settled back into his chair with his own glass. "Occasionally, we can consume human food and drink, though it provides no sustenance. It's purely for pleasure." He took a small sip. "This particular brandy is from 1847. It would be a shame to let it go to waste." She tasted it. The burn was immediate and warming, spreading through her chest. "It's good. It should be. I've been saving it for 170 years." Despite everything, the fear, the grief, the sheer impossibility of her situation, Alara felt a smile tug at her lips. You waited over a century to open a bottle of brandy? I was waiting for the right moment. His eyes met hers across the lamplight. This seemed appropriate. They drank in companionable silence. Elara felt the brandy loosening the knot in her chest, the warmth seeping into her bones. She studied Kale over the rim of her glass, this ancient, dangerous creature who read philosophy and saved century-old brandy, and bandaged her hand with surprising gentleness. Why did you help me? She asked. You could have let them kill me. It would have been simpler. Kale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I've lived through 13 centuries of violence, he said. Watched empires burn, seen plagues take millions, participated in wars you couldn't imagine. He stared into his glass. Somewhere along the way, I decided that if I couldn't prevent suffering, I could at least refuse to cause it unnecessarily. You were innocent, caught in something beyond your understanding. Letting you die would have been. He paused, searching for the word. Wasteful, wasteful, Elara repeated, perhaps the wrong word. He met her gaze. You deserve better than to be collateral damage in someone else's war. Something in his voice, some thread of old pain, old regret made Elara wonder what wars he'd fought, what collateral damage he'd caused or witnessed. But his expression had closed again, shuttered behind that terrible control. She finished her brandy and set the glass aside. The warmth had settled into her limbs now, making her heavy, drowsy. I should try to sleep again, she said. Kale nodded. I'll be here if you need anything. The house is warded, nothing can enter without my permission. You're safe. That word again. Safe. Elara stood, pulling the silk dressing gown tighter around herself. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. Kale had already returned to his book, the lamplight casting his profile in sharp relief. He looked carved from stone, eternal and alone, surrounded by centuries of accumulated knowledge and not a single sign that anyone else lived in this house with him. She wondered how long it had been since he'd had company, since he'd shared that brandy with anyone. Good night, Kale, she said softly. He glanced up, and for just a moment, something warm flickered in those ancient eyes. Good night, Elara. She climbed the stairs to her borrowed room, and this time, when she lay down, sleep came easier. And if she dreamed of gray eyes and century-old brandy and hands that could kill, but chose to bandage instead, well, no one needed to know but her. Chapter 4. The things she noticed. 3 days passed in strange suspension. Elara woke each morning to find breakfast waiting on the small table in her room. Fresh bread, butter, jam, tea that was still hot. She never saw Kale bring it, never heard him on the stairs. He simply provided, like a ghost haunting his own home. During the daylight hours, she had the house to herself. Kale disappeared into a room on the ground floor that remained locked, and Elara learned not to disturb him. She spent her time exploring the bookshelves, reading novels in languages she understood and admiring ones she didn't. She found sketchbooks filled with architectural drawings, letters written in fading ink, a music box that played a melody she almost recognized. Each object told a story. Each one whispered of the long, lonely life Kale had lived. But it was the small things, the wrong things, that caught her attention. On the second day, she noticed he never opened the curtains. Even after sunset, when he emerged from his locked room, the heavy drapes stayed drawn. She asked him about it once. Habit, he'd said, and caution. The third house is watching. On the third day, she noticed the food. Kale kept the kitchen stocked: bread, fruit, cheese, wine, but none of it was for him. The bread went stale before he touched it. The fruit sat in its bowl untouched. Everything was for her. When did you last eat? She asked that evening as he sat in his study, another ancient book in his lap. He looked up, momentarily puzzled. Eat? Food. Human food. 2 weeks ago. Perhaps 3. He turned a page. A dinner party. Political necessity. You don't enjoy it? It tastes like ash. He said it matter-of-factly. Everything does, except blood. That's the price of immortality. You lose the ability to take pleasure in mortal things. But that wasn't quite true, she'd noticed. He still drank brandy occasionally, still handled his books with something like reverence, still paused when she played the music box, as if the melody stirred some old memory. On the 4th night, she came downstairs to find him standing at the window, one hand holding the curtain barely open. He was watching the street with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. What is it? She asked. They're out there. He let the curtain fall closed. Third house scouts. They've been circling since yesterday. Elara's throat went dry. Are they coming for me? Not yet. They're testing boundaries. Seeing how serious I am about protecting you. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. They won't attack directly. Not while you're under my roof. But if you stepped outside, I'd be dead, she finished. Yes. She sank into the chair by the fire, suddenly aware of how trapped she was. 4 days inside these walls. 4 days of borrowed time, borrowed safety, borrowed life. And outside, things within human strength were waiting for her to make a single mistake. How do you live like this? She asked quietly. Always watching. Always careful. Never truly safe. Cale moved to pour himself brandy, his nightly ritual. She'd learned. You adapt. After the first few centuries, danger becomes ordinary. You learn to read threats the way humans read weather. That sounds exhausting. It is. He settled into his usual chair across from her. But the alternative is death, and I'm not ready for that. Not yet. Ilara studied him in the firelight. He looked the same as he had 4 nights ago, ageless, controlled, untouchable. But she was starting to see the cracks in that facade. The way his jaw tightened when he mentioned the third house. The careful distance he maintained, never sitting too close, never touching her unless necessary. May I ask you something? She ventured. You've been asking me questions all week. This one is different. She hesitated. When you feed, how does it work? The silence that fell was heavy. Cale's fingers tightened around his glass. That's a dangerous question, Ilara. I'm living in a vampire's house. I think I deserve to understand. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. We need blood to survive, he said slowly. How often depends on age and discipline. Young vampires feed nightly, recklessly. I can go weeks, sometimes a month, if I'm careful. And when you do feed? I have arrangements, willing donors who understand what they're offering. The exchange is consensual, always. His voice hardened. I don't hunt. I don't take by force. Those are the rules I live by. But you could, Ilara said. If you wanted to. You're strong enough. I'm strong enough to do many things I choose not to do. He held her gaze. Strength without control is just violence. I've had 13 centuries to learn the difference. She believed him. Despite everything, despite the danger, the strangeness, the impossibility, she believed him. When did you last feed? She asked. His expression shuddered. Why does that matter? Because you look tired. If that's even possible for a vampire. Cale actually smiled, brief and humorless. It's possible. And it's been longer than is wise. Because of me. Because of the situation. I can't leave the house while the third house is watching. Can't risk leading them to my donors. Can't. He stopped abruptly. Can't what? He stood, moving to the fire with his back to her. The flames cast shifting shadows across his shoulders. Can't trust myself around you when I'm this hungry, he said quietly. The admission hung in the air between them. Ilara's pulse quickened, not with fear exactly, but with something more complicated. Awareness. Understanding of the danger she represented simply by being human. By having a heartbeat, by bleeding when she was hurt. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't realize. Don't apologize. He turned back to her, and his eyes were darker than usual, storm gray gone almost black. This is my choice. My responsibility. You're under my protection, which means you're safe from everyone, including me. I trust you. You shouldn't. The words came out sharp. You've known me for days, Ilara. You don't know what I'm capable of, what I've done, what I could do if I lost control. Then why haven't you? She stood, facing him across the fire. You're hungry. I'm right here, helpless, alone. If you were the monster you're describing, I'd already be dead. Perhaps I'm just a patient monster. Or perhaps you're not a monster at all. Cale laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I've killed more people than you've met in your entire life. I've waged wars, burned cities, made decisions that cost thousands their lives. I am exactly what you should fear. But you saved me, Ilara insisted. You didn't have to. You could have walked past that alley and let them kill me. But you didn't. That doesn't make me good. It makes me slightly less terrible than the alternative. She stepped closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. You bandaged my hand. You gave me shelter. You read philosophy and save brandy and keep this whole house stocked with food you can't even enjoy just so I'd be comfortable. Those aren't the actions of a monster, Ilara. Her name was a warning. Stop. Why? Because you're standing too close. Because your heartbeat is too loud. Because I haven't fed in 3 weeks and you smell like everything I'm trying not to want. She should have stepped back. Should have been afraid. But looking at him, at the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control in his posture, the hunger and restraint warring in his eyes, all she felt was a strange, reckless courage. What do I smell like? She asked softly. Cale closed his eyes. Lavender from the clothes I gave you. Jasmine from the soap. And underneath that, life, warmth, mortality. He opened his eyes again, and they were definitely darker now. Everything I've lost. Everything I can never have again. The moment stretched between them, fragile and dangerous. Elara could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the heat from the fire, could see the exact moment when Cale's control almost slipped. Then he turned away sharply, putting the width of the room between them. Go to bed, he said, his voice rough. Please. Elara didn't argue. She left him standing by the fire, hands clenched into fists at his sides, and climbed the stairs to her borrowed room. But sleep was a long time coming. And when it finally did, she dreamed of dark eyes and dangerous hunger and the sound of her name spoken like a prayer or a curse. Chapter 5. The blood oath attack came at midnight on the 7th day. Elara woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, heart hammering, as crashes and shouts erupted from downstairs. The house shook, furniture overturning, something heavy hitting the walls. She grabbed the dressing gown and ran to her door, hands trembling as she unlocked it. The hallway was dark except for strange flashes of light from below, blue-white and violent, like lightning trapped indoors. Cale, she shouted. And no answer. Just more crashes. A roar that didn't sound human. Elara descended the stairs, keeping to the shadows. The study door hung open, torn from its hinges. Inside, chaos reigned. 3 vampires circled Cale. She recognized one from the alley, the tall one who'd tried to strangle her. The other 2 were strangers, moving with that same inhuman speed. They attacked in coordinated strikes, forcing Cale back against the bookshelf. He was magnificent and terrifying. He moved like violence made art, blocking strikes that should have been too fast to see, countering with blows that sent his attackers staggering. But there were 3 of them, and he was weakened. She could see it in the way he favored his left side, the slight hesitation in his movements, because he hadn't fed. Because of her. One vampire lunged. Cale caught him by the throat and threw him across the room directly toward the stairs. Toward Elara. She pressed herself against the wall as the vampire crashed past her, snarling. He recovered instantly, his eyes locking on her with predatory focus. The human, he hissed. Don't, Cale warned. His voice was lethal. Quiet. Touch her and I'll make your death last week's. The vampire smiled. You can't protect her and fight us both. He was right. The moment Cale's attention shifted to her, the other 2 attacked as one. Cale went down under their combined weight, fangs and claws tearing at him. Dark blood to dark to be human spattered across the floor. The vampire on the stairs lunged for Elara. She ran back up the stairs, her bare feet slipping on the wood, his footsteps impossibly close behind her. She made it to her room and slammed the door, throwing the lock. It wouldn't hold, she knew that, but maybe it would by seconds. She looked around desperately. The window, but they were 2 stories up, and the street below held more third-house vampires. The wardrobe useless as a hiding place. The bedside table held only a lamp, and her fingers closed around the letter opener she'd found days ago. Silver, sharp, probably decorative, probably useless against a vampire, but it was something. The door exploded inward. The vampire stepped through, smiling. Clever girl. Running only makes it sweeter. Elara backed toward the window, the letter opener held in both hands. Stay back. Or what? You'll scratch me? He moved closer, savoring her fear. I'm going to drain you slowly. Let Cale hear you scream. Let him know he failed. He lunged. Elara swung the letter opener wildly. By sheer luck, the blade caught his cheek, cutting deep. He jerked back with a hiss of pain. The blood that welled up was that same dark red, almost black, and burning. The vampire clutched his face, his skin smoking where the silver had cut him. You little, he didn't finish. Cale appeared behind him like a shadow coalescing into form. One hand closed around the vampire's throat, the other twisted, and there was a sound like breaking branches. The vampire fell, lifeless. Cale stood in the doorway, breathing hard, unnecessary for a vampire. Elara realized, which meant he was hurt badly. His shirt was torn, revealing cuts that wept dark blood. His eyes were completely black now, no gray visible at all. Are you injured? His voice was rough, strained. Alara shook her head, unable to speak. Good. He turned toward the hallway. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Wait, but he was already gone. Moving with that terrible speed despite his injuries, Alara couldn't stay. She knew it was safer, but she'd seen the blood, seen how he moved. He was hurt, protecting her. The least she could do was see it through. She crept downstairs, letter opener still clutched in her hand. The study was a wreck, furniture shattered, books scattered, one wall cracked from impact. 2 more bodies lay motionless on the floor. Kale stood in the center of the destruction, swaying slightly. As Alara watched, he pressed a hand to his side where his shirt was soaked through with blood. I told you to stay upstairs, he said without turning around. You're hurt, I'll heal. You said you haven't fed in weeks. How can you heal if I'll manage? He finally looked at her, and his expression was wrong. Too controlled, too careful. Like he was holding himself together by pure will. You need to leave this room. Now. Let me help you. Alara. Her name came out strangled. I just killed 3 vampires. I'm hurt and hungry and barely holding on to control. The absolute worst thing you can do right now is stand there bleeding. She looked down. The letter opener had cut her palm. She hadn't even felt it. Fresh blood welled red against her bandage from days before. Oh, she whispered. Kale's hands clenched into fists. Go, upstairs. Lock the door. But what I need is for you to be anywhere but here. The words came out as a snarl. I can smell your blood from across the room. I can hear your pulse. I can feel your warmth. And I am so hungry that I'm imagining what you'd taste like. Which means you need to leave before I do something we'll both regret. Alara should have run. Should have been terrified. But looking at him at the control, it was taking him not to hurt her. At the way he kept himself rigidly distant despite his need, she made a choice. What if I don't regret it? She asked softly. Kale went absolutely still. What? You saved my life. Again. You're hurt because you protected me. If you need blood. She swallowed hard. Take it. Alara. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly what I'm offering. Her hand was shaking, but she kept her voice steady. Consent. Willingness. Whatever you need to heal. It's not that simple. Feeding creates connections, especially the first time. It's intimate, binding. His voice was strained. There's a reason we call it a blood oath when a vampire takes from a willing donor. Then consider it an oath. She stepped closer, drawn by courage she didn't know she possessed. You've protected me. Let me protect you. I could hurt you, could take too much. Could, but you won't. Alara interrupted. You have 1,300 years of control. You won't hurt me. Kale stared at her, something like anguish in his black eyes. Why? Why would you trust me with this? Because you've earned it. Because you've had 100 chances to hurt me and chosen not to. Because. She held out her bleeding hand. Because I think you've been alone too long. And I think maybe I have too. The silence stretched. Then Kale moved, not with vampire speed, but slowly, giving her time to change her mind. He took her hand gently, his cool fingers closing around her wrist. His thumb brushed across her racing pulse. Last chance, he said quietly. After this, there's no going back. Alara met his eyes. I know. He raised her hand to his mouth, hesitated one final moment. Then his lips brushed across her bleeding palm, and fire. Ice, lightning crackling through her veins. Alara gasped as sensation flooded her, not pain exactly, but intensity beyond anything she'd imagined. She could feel Kale's hunger, his restraint, his desperate need warring with iron control. Could feel the connection forming between them, fragile and new and terrifying. He drank carefully, taking only what he needed, one hand cradling hers with impossible gentleness. And when he finally pulled back, his eyes were gray again, storm gray and ancient and full of something that might have been wonder. Alara, he breathed. She swayed. He caught her before she fell, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, and carried her to the intact chair by the cold fireplace. I'm all right, she managed. Just dizzy. You gave me too much. He was already reaching for bandages, wrapping her hand with shaking fingers. Foolish, brave girl. You should have stopped me. You stopped yourself. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and the expression on his face stole her breath. Gratitude and guilt and something deeper, something that had no name. Thank you, he said quietly. And Alara, exhausted and dizzy, and bound now to a vampire by blood and choice, smiled. You're welcome. Chapter 6. The truth between them. Alara woke in her own bed with no memory of getting there, Sunlight filtered through the curtains, real sunlight, which meant hours had passed. She sat up slowly, her head swimming. Her hand was freshly bandaged, the white cloth stark against her skin. She touched it gingerly, and felt only a dull ache, nothing like the fire. She remembered the blood oath. She'd let Cale feed from her. The memory rushed back, his mouth on her palm, the overwhelming sensation of connection, the way his eyes had changed from black to gray as he drank, the way he'd looked at her afterward, like she'd given him something precious and breakable. She found a tray on the bedside table, tea, bread, soft cheese, and a note in elegant handwriting. You need to eat. Rest today. We'll talk when you're ready. Kellara ate mechanically, her mind spinning. The attack. The third house vampires breaking through Cale's wards. The bodies downstairs. How had he moved them? How had he cleaned up what must have been a massacre? And more importantly, what happened now? She dressed in one of the borrowed gowns and ventured downstairs. The study looked untouched. The shattered furniture was gone, the books returned to their shelves, the cracked wall somehow repaired. Only the faint smell of something chemical bleach, maybe hinted that anything had happened. Cale sat at his desk, writing. He looked up as she entered, and Alara's breath caught. He was different. Healed completely, no sign of the terrible wounds from last night. His eyes were their normal gray again, clear and focused. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite name. An awareness between them that hadn't existed before. You should be resting, he said, setting down his pen. I've rested enough. Alara moved into the room, taking in the restored order. How did you all of this? Old skills. And a great deal of money. I have people who handle cleanups. His expression was carefully neutral. The third house won't find their missing scouts. No one will. Alara absorbed this. 3 vampires vanished without trace. She should have been horrified. Instead, she felt only a distant numbness. They came for me, she said quietly. They came to test my resolve. You were the excuse. Cale stood, but maintained distance. She noticed that, keeping the desk between them. The third house is moving toward open war. Last night was a declaration. What will you do? Call the council. Force the other houses to acknowledge the treaty violations. The third house has broken too many laws, they can't ignore it anymore. He paused. But that will take time. And it will be dangerous. For you? For both of us. He met her eyes. The blood oath complicates things. There it was, the thing they'd been dancing around. Alara sat in the chair across from his desk, suddenly needing the support. What exactly does it mean? She asked. The oath? Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the daylit street beyond the heavy curtains. When a vampire feeds from a willing donor, it creates a bond, he said carefully. The vampire can sense the donor's emotions, their physical state. Distance doesn't matter. I could feel if you were hurt or afraid anywhere in the city. The connection fades over time, if not renewed. But for now, he trailed off. For now, you're connected to me. Yes. Alara tried to process this. Can you read my thoughts? No, just feelings. General states. He glanced back at her. Right now, you're confused, anxious, but not afraid, which is remarkable considering. And what about me? Can I sense you? Potentially. With practice. The bond is stronger for the vampire initially, but it can equalize. His jaw tightened. I should have explained all of this before. Should have made certain you understood what you were offering. Would it have changed anything? Alara asked. You were dying. The third house was attacking. What else could I have done? You could have run. Hidden upstairs like I told you to. Let me handle my own problems. And let you bleed out because you were too noble to feed? She shook her head. No, I made my choice, Cale. I don't regret it. Something flickered across his face, relief maybe, or gratitude. He returned to his desk, but remained standing. There's more you need to understand, he said. The blood oath also marks you as mine in vampire society. Other vampires will sense it, know that you're under my protection. Yes, but also that you're, he searched for the word, claimed. Heat crept up Alara's neck. Claimed? It's an old term. Doesn't mean ownership, or it shouldn't, though some houses interpret it that way. His voice hardened. It means you've given consent for me to feed from you. That creates certain expectations. What kind of expectations? That the relationship is ongoing, intimate, exclusive. He met her eyes. Other vampires will assume we're lovers. The word hung in the air between them. Alara's pulse quickened, and she saw Kale's attention flicker to her throat, a reflex. She realized he could hear her heartbeat change. But we're not, she said. No, his voice was carefully controlled. We're not. Should we be? The question escaped before she could stop it. Kale went very still. Alara, I'm not suggesting. She stood abruptly, needing to move. I just mean, if other vampires will assume it anyway, shouldn't I understand what that means? What they'll expect to see. What they'll expect, Kale said slowly, is that you'll stay close to me. That I'll be protective, possessive even. That you'll defer to me in vampire company. His expression darkened. It's antiquated, offensive. I despise the entire system. But it's how vampire society functions. And if I don't defer, if I speak for myself, then you'll be seen as rebellious, difficult. Some vampires will respect that. Others will see it as an insult to me, proof that I can't control my own donor. He said the last words with distaste. It's barbaric, but it's reality. Alara absorbed this. She'd stumbled into a world with rules she didn't understand, marked herself with an oath she hadn't fully comprehended, and now she was expected to play a role she'd never auditioned for. Teach me, she said suddenly. Kale blinked. What? The rules. The expectations. How to navigate vampire society. She moved closer to the desk. If I'm going to be trapped in this world, I want to understand it. I don't want to be helpless. You're not trapped. Once the third house is dealt with, you can leave. Resume your life. Can I? Alara challenged. With this bond between us? With vampires able to sense I've been claimed? You said the connection fades. But how long does that take? Months, sometimes years, if the bond was strong. And was it? Strong? Kale's silence was answer enough. Alara nodded slowly. So even if I leave, I'll carry this mark. Other vampires will sense it. I'll never be truly safe, will I? I'll protect you. You can't protect me if I'm not here. You can't be everywhere. She held his gaze. So teach me. Help me understand this world enough to survive it. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then he sank into his chair, looking suddenly tired, an odd expression on an ageless face. You're right, he said quietly. I've been selfish. Keeping you here, keeping you ignorant, thinking I could shelter you until the danger passed. But danger doesn't pass in our world. It just waits. So you'll teach me? I'll teach you. He picked up his pen, then set it down again. But Alara, you need to understand something. The more you learn about us, about me, the harder it will be to go back to your old life. Knowledge changes you. Especially this kind of knowledge. My old life is gone anyway, Alara said. My sister is dead. I'm penniless. I have nothing to go back to. She paused. Maybe that's why this doesn't terrify me as much as it should. I've already lost everything. What's one more impossible thing? Kale's expression softened. You haven't lost everything. You're still here, still fighting. That counts for something. Is it enough? It's more than enough. He stood again, and this time when he looked at her, there was something new in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Recognition. We'll start tonight. I'll teach you about the houses, the council, the laws that govern us. And tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll take you to meet someone who can help us. An ally in the second house. His jaw tightened. If we're going to survive what's coming, you'll need more than just knowledge. You'll need friends in dangerous places. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not fear exactly, but anticipation. She was stepping deeper into this world, making choices that couldn't be unmade. But for the first time since her sister's death, she felt something like purpose. All right, she said. I'm ready. Kale smiled, small and genuine and surprisingly warm. No, you're not, he said. But you will be. Chapter 7. The gathering stormed. Second house occupied what had once been a theater. Alara stood beside Kale in the shadows across the street, studying the elegant facade. Gas lamps flickered on either side of ornate doors. And even from here, she could hear music, something classical, played on instruments that sounded centuries old. Lady Cassia runs the second house, Kale explained quietly. She's been vampire longer than I have. 1700 years, give or take. She values art, culture, and appearances above all else. Is she dangerous? Extremely. But she's also pragmatic. She won't tolerate the third house breaking the accords. It threatens the stability she's spent centuries building. He glanced down at her. Let me do the talking. Observe, learn. Don't offer information she doesn't ask for. Alara nodded. Smoothing down the dress Kale had provided deep burgundy silk that whispered against her skin, far finer than anything she'd ever owned. He'd insisted she dress appropriately. Cassia notices everything, he'd said, especially disrespect. They crossed the street together. Kale's hand rested lightly on the small of her back, a gesture that looked protective but felt like a brand. Claiming her in front of anyone watching, the doors opened before they reached them. A tall vampire in formal livery bowed slightly. Lord Thorn, Lady Cassia is expecting you. His eyes flicked to Elara with barely concealed curiosity. And your companion, my donor, Kale said calmly. Under my protection. The emphasis wasn't lost on anyone. The doorman's expression shuddered immediately into professional neutrality. They were led through corridors lined with paintings and sculptures, past rooms where vampires gathered in small groups, talking in low voices. Elara felt their eyes on her, assessing, calculating. She kept her chin up and her expression neutral, the way Kale had taught her. You're doing well, Kale murmured. Just a bit further. They entered a grand salon that took Elara's breath away. The ceiling soared 3 stories high, painted with frescoes of mythological scenes. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over furniture that belonged in museums. And at the center of it all, seated in a throne-like chair, was Lady Cassia. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Pale as marble, with hair like spilled ink, and eyes the color of dark honey. She wore a gown of midnight blue that seemed to shimmer when she moved, and jewels that probably cost more than Elara's entire street. Kale, she said, her voice like honey over steel. How delightful. And you've brought a pet. Elara felt Kale stiffen beside her. His hand tightened fractionally on her back, a warning. I've brought my donor, he said evenly. Elara, she's under my protection. And the blood oath. Cassia's eyes widened with genuine interest. A blood oath. How wonderfully old-fashioned of you. I haven't seen you take a donor in, what, 2 centuries? 3, even better. Cassia rose with liquid grace and approached. Elara forced herself to stand still as the ancient vampire circled her, studying her like a specimen. She's pretty, unremarkable but pretty, and mortal, which is intriguing. You usually prefer vampire donors. My preferences are my own, Kale said. Indeed. Cassia completed her circuit and returned to her throne. So tell me, Kale, why have you come to my house with your pretty little mortal? Surely not just to show her off. The 3rd house attacked my home 4 nights ago. Sent 3 vampires to kill her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Cassia's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Did they succeed? Obviously not. And the 3 vampires? Dead. Cassia was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, sharp and predatory. Good. Marcus has been getting bold. Too bold. His bloodwine operation is destabilizing the younger vampires. And now he's attacking first house property? That's war. That's why I'm here, Kale said. I'm calling for a council meeting. Formal charges against the 3rd house for violating the accords. About time. Cassia settled back in her throne. The 4th and 5th houses have been complaining for months. Marcus thinks because he controls the ports, he's untouchable. He needs to be reminded otherwise. Will you support the charges? Publicly? Yes. The accords exist for a reason. Her gaze slid to Elara. But I want something in return. Kale's hand tightened on Elara's back again. What? Information. Your little mortal witnessed the bloodwine exchange, yes? She saw Marcus's operation firsthand? Elara opened her mouth, but Kale spoke first. She saw 2 vampires exchanging a vial. Nothing more. Still, a mortal witness could be useful at the council. Proof that Marcus is careless, that his operation threatens exposure. Cassia leaned forward. Let me question her. Just a few minutes. I'll be gentle. No, Kale said flatly. Kale, she's mine, Cassia. Not a bargaining chip. Not a witness to be paraded before the council. Mine. The possessiveness in his voice sent a shiver through Elara, and judging by Cassia's knowing smile, she'd noticed how protective Cassia purred. One might almost think you care for her. One might mind their own business. Cassia laughed, bright and dangerous. Oh, Kale, always so serious. Fine, keep your secrets. But the council will ask questions. They'll want to know why you're protecting a mortal so fiercely. What will you tell them? The truth. That she's under my protection and anyone who touches her answers to me. And if they press? If they demand to know what makes her special? Kale was silent. Elara could feel the tension radiating from him, could sense through their bond that he was calculating. Weighing options, she made a decision. I can speak for myself, she said quietly. Both vampires turned to look at her. Kale's expression was unreadable. Cassia's was delighted. Can you? Cassia asked. How refreshing. Most donors barely manage 3 words in my presence. Alara met the ancient vampire's gaze, fighting the instinct to look away. I witnessed 2 vampires exchanging what looked like a vial of blood. One of them said something about the product and expanding distribution. Then they saw me and decided I needed to die. She kept her voice steady. Kale saved my life. That's why I'm under his protection. That's why I agreed to the blood oath. Not because I'm special, but because he is. Silence fell. Cassia studied her with new interest. Articulate, she murmured. Brave, considering, and loyal. Her smile turned, knowing. You chose well, Kale. I didn't choose her, Kale said. Circumstances chose for both of us. Of course. Cassia waved a dismissive hand. In any case, you have my support for the council. I'll speak to the 4th and 5th houses, ensure they're prepared to vote against Marcus. She paused. But be warned, the 3rd house won't go quietly. Marcus has allies, resources. He'll fight. Let him, Kale said coldly. I've been fighting longer than he's been alive. True. But you have something to lose now. Cassia's gaze slid meaningfully to Alara. A vulnerability. Marcus will exploit that. He can try. Oh, he will. Cassia stood again. The council meets in 3 nights. I suggest you keep your little mortal very close until then. And after, well, we'll see who's still standing. The meeting was clearly over. Kale inclined his head, the barest acknowledgement of respect, and guided Alara toward the door. Kale? Cassia called as they reached the threshold. He paused. Take care of her. Mortal donors are fragile things. And it would be a shame if something happened before I got to see how this all plays out. Kale didn't answer. He simply led Alara out of the salon, through the corridors, past the staring vampires, and out into the cold night air. They walked in silence for several blocks before Alara spoke. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. You did well. Kale interrupted. Better than I expected. You're angry. I'm concerned. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Cassia is right. The council will be dangerous. Marcus will fight back. And you. He reached up, his cool fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. You're exactly the kind of leverage he'll try to use against me. Alara's breath caught. Through the bond, she could feel something from him, concern, yes, but also something deeper. Something that felt almost like fear. Then we'll be careful, she said. Careful won't be enough. His hand dropped. 3 nights? Alara. 3 nights until the council meets. And if Marcus knows you're my weakness. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Chapter 8. The night before Thea didn't make it home, Kale stopped 2 blocks from his townhouse, his hand tightening on Alara's arm. She felt it through the bond before he spoke, a spike of alarm, cold and sharp. What is it? She whispered. They're watching the house. 3rd house. At least 6 of them. His jaw clenched. Marcus knows about the council meeting. He's moving faster than I anticipated. What do we do? Kale scanned the street, his eyes catching the lamplight. We can't go back. Not tonight. They're waiting for us to try. He pulled her into the shadow of a doorway, thinking, I have a safe house. Older, less obvious. But we'll have to move carefully. They navigated through alleys and side streets, Kale choosing their path with the precision of someone who'd mapped this city across centuries. Alara's feet ached in the delicate shoes, her heart hammering every time she heard footsteps. The safe house was in the warehouse district, a forgotten area of crumbling buildings and broken windows. Kale unlocked a nondescript door and ushered her inside. The interior was sparse. A single room with a bed, a table, 2 chairs, no windows. A lamp sat on the table, already filled with oil. Kale lit it, and warm light pushed back the shadows. I'm sorry, he said, surveying the bare space. It's not much. It's safe. That's what matters. Alara sank into one of the chairs, exhaustion pulling at her bones. How long do we have to stay here? Until the council meeting. 2 more nights. He moved to check the door, multiple locks. She noticed, and something else. Symbols carved into the frame. The wards here are stronger, older magic. They won't break through easily. And if they do, then I'll kill them. As many as it takes. He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. Alara watched him move around the small space, checking locks, testing wards, ensuring their security. He'd shed his coat, and in shirt sleeves, he looked less like an ancient lord and more like a man preparing for battle. Except men didn't move like that, didn't carry that kind of coiled violence in every gesture. Cale, she said quietly, when the council meets, what happens to me? He paused. You'll stay hidden. Somewhere safe. That's not what I meant. She stood, needing to face him directly. After. When this is over, what happens to me? Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed to the table and sat across from her, the lamp flickering between them. That depends, he said carefully. On what? On what you want. He met her eyes. The blood oath will fade eventually. Months. Maybe a year. Once it does, you'll be free. No connection to me. No mark that other vampires can sense. You can leave the city. Start over somewhere new. I have resources. I can provide enough money that you'll never have to worry about your sister's debts. That sounds very final, Elara said. It's an option. What's the other option? Cale's expression was carefully controlled. You stay. Renew the blood oath. Remain as my donor. He paused. It would mean belonging to this world, to the dangers and the politics and all the darkness that comes with it. But you'd be protected, provided for, and. She prompted when he trailed off, and I wouldn't have to watch you leave. The admission came out quiet, almost reluctant. Elara's breath caught. Through the bond, she felt something from him, longing, carefully controlled. Fear of her answer. You want me to stay, she said. Want is a dangerous word. Cale looked away. I've lived 13 centuries learning not to want things I can't keep. Mortals die, Elara. Even under the best circumstances, you'd have perhaps 60 more years. That's nothing to me. A blink. And then I'd have to watch you age, weaken, fade away. Like everyone else I've ever. He stopped abruptly. Like everyone you've ever what? Elara asked softly. Cale was silent. Then, like everyone I've ever cared about. The words hung between them. Elara felt her pulse quicken, felt the bond humming with shared emotion, his carefully contained longing, her growing understanding of what he was truly asking. There's a third option, she said quietly. He looked up. What? You could turn me. Cale went absolutely still. No, I'm not. You said yourself that mortals die, that 60 years is nothing. If I became vampire, no, he repeated, harder. I won't do that to you. It's my choice. It's not a choice. It's a curse. He stood abruptly, pacing. Do you have any idea what you're asking? What it means to be vampire? You'd lose everything: warmth, sunlight, the taste of food. You'd have to feed on humans, watch everyone you know grow old and die while you stay frozen. You'd become something other, something apart forever. I'd have time, Elara countered. Centuries instead of decades. I could learn things, see things, be more than just some poor girl who buried her sister and nearly got strangled in an alley. You're already more than that, am I? She stood to face him. What do I have, Cale? No family, no home. No future except growing old alone in some boarding house, always looking over my shoulder for vampires who might remember the blood oath. Her voice cracked. You're offering me money and safety and a chance to run away. But what if I don't want to run? What if I want to stay? For how long? He asked harshly. A year? 5? 10? And then what? You wake up one day and realize you've wasted your life playing house with a monster? You're not a monster. I've killed thousands in wars that ended centuries ago. You're not that person anymore. Elara moved closer. The vampire I know reads philosophy and saves brandy and bandages my hands when I'm hurt. The vampire I know protected me when he had every reason not to. That's not a monster. Cale looked at her with something like pain. You don't know me, Elara. Not really. You know the version of me I've let you see. Then show me the rest. She reached for his hand. His fingers were cool against hers, but they curled around her hand gently. Show me all of it. The good and the terrible and everything in between. Let me choose with full knowledge. And if what you see horrifies you, then I'll deal with it. She squeezed his hand. But at least give me the chance. Cale stared at their joined hands. Through the bond, Elara felt the war inside him, longing and fear and old, deep guilt. I was turned against my will, he said quietly. 1300 years ago, I was a soldier, wounded in battle. A vampire found me dying and decided I was worth saving. Except it wasn't salvation, it was damnation. I woke up changed, wrong, hungry for things I'd never craved before. It took me decades to accept what I'd become, centuries to find any kind of peace with it. He looked up, his gray eyes haunted. I swore I would never do that to another person. Never force this existence on someone who didn't fully understand the cost. And you can't understand, Elara. Not truly. Not until it's too late. Then help me understand, she said. We have 2 nights before the council. Teach me. Show me what it really means. And then I'll decide. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Tonight's, he agreed. I'll show you everything. The truth about what I am, what we are. The darkness and the hunger and the endless weight of immortality. His grip on her hand tightened. But understand this, if after seeing all of it, you still want this life, I won't be the one to turn you. I can't. I won't carry that guilt. Then who? Cassia, perhaps. Or someone else from the older houses. Someone who can do it properly, safely. His expression softened fractionally. But it won't come to that. Once you see the truth, you'll choose to leave. They always do. The sadness in his voice broke something in Elara's chest. She realized suddenly that this wasn't the first time he'd had this conversation. That somewhere in his long past, he'd cared for someone who'd asked for immortality. And then what happened to them? She asked quietly. The others who wanted to stay? Kale's smile was bitter. Some I convinced to leave. Gave them money and watched them build lives far from me. Some stayed as donors until they grew older, wiser, and realized what they'd almost chosen. And one, he trailed off. One? Elara prompted. One I turned. His voice went hollow. Against my better judgment. Because she begged. Because I was lonely. Because I thought perhaps this time it would be different. And for 50 years it was. Until she couldn't bear it anymore. Until the weight of immortality and the horror of what she'd become drove her to walk into the sun. Elara's breath stopped. Kale, so you see, he continued, pulling his hand away from hers. Why I won't make that mistake again. Why, I'd rather watch you leave, live a full mortal life, and die peacefully in your sleep, than risk watching you realize too late that immortality is a prison, not a gift. He turned away, shoulders rigid with old pain. Elara stood frozen, understanding, settling over her like a shroud. This wasn't about whether she could handle vampire life. It was about whether he could handle losing her to it. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. Just listen, learn, and choose wisely. He moved toward the door. I need to patrol the perimeter. Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. Kale, wait, but he was already gone. Disappearing into the night with that terrible speed. Leaving Elara alone in the flickering lamplight with the weight of 13 centuries of grief between them. Chapter 9. The Choice-Gil returned an hour later to find Elara still awake, sitting at the table with the lamp burning low. He locked the door behind him, engaging each bolt with methodical precision. His shirt was torn at the shoulder and new wound, though it was already healing. Dark blood stained the fabric. What happened? Elara asked, standing. 3rd House scouts. 2 of them got too close. I sent a message. His tone was flat, distant. The walls he'd lowered earlier were firmly back in place. Elara crossed to him, reaching for his injured shoulder. Let me see. It's nothing. Already healing. Kale, I said it's nothing. He moved past her to the small wash basin in the corner, stripping off his ruined shirt. His back was a map of old scars, white lines against pale skin, remnants of injuries from before he was turned. And newer marks, too. Claw marks. Bite wounds that had healed wrong. Elara watched him wash the blood away with efficient movements. No wasted motion. No reaction to what must have been pain, even for a vampire. You said you'd show me the truth, she said quietly. Is this part of it? The violence? The constant fighting? Kale dried his hands and turned to face her. This is the smallest part, the easiest to understand. He moved to the bed and sat, gesturing for her to take the chair. The violence? You've already seen. What you haven't seen is the rest. Then show me. He was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts. Then he began. Immortality isn't freedom, it's accumulation. Every year adds weight. Every decade brings more memories you can't forget. More faces you'll never see again. More moments that haunt you in the endless nights. His voice was steady, clinical. You asked what it's like to feed. I told you. The mechanics. But I didn't tell you about the hunger. The hunger? It's not like mortal hunger. It's not your stomach demanding food. It's your entire being craving life force, warmth, the pulse of blood through living veins. And it never stops. Even when you've just fed, it's there waiting, watching, ready to consume you if you lose control for even a moment. Elara absorbed this. But you control it. After 1300 years, yes. But the first century? His laugh was harsh. I was a monster, killed without thinking, fed without permission, left bodies in my wake. It took 100 years to learn restraint, another 100 to develop ethics. And even now, there are moments, he trailed off, looking at his hands. Moments like what? Elara prompted. Like when you offered me your blood. When I was wounded and hungry, and you were right there, trusting me not to hurt you. He met her eyes. I came so close to taking too much. To drinking until your heart stopped. The only thing that saved you was 13 centuries of practice. Without that, you'd be dead. The words should have frightened her. Instead, she felt only the echo of his fear through the bond, his terror at how close he'd come to losing control. But you didn't, she said. You stopped. This time, his jaw clenched. What about the next time? Or the time after that? How long before I make a mistake? Before the hunger wins? The same could be true of any relationship, Elara countered. Mortal or immortal, we're all one bad decision away from hurting the people we care about. Not like this. Mortals don't accidentally drain their lovers dry. The word lovers hung in the air. Neither of them acknowledged it. Kale stood and moved to lean against the wall, arms crossed. There's more. Things I haven't told you about vampire society. About what it means to be claimed. I know the basics. That other vampires will assume we're intimate. It's more than assumptions. His voice hardened. In vampire society, donors are property. Not legally, not officially. But in practice? Yes. They're possessions to be displayed, controlled, sometimes traded between houses for political favor. The blood oath marks you as mine, which means other vampires will expect me to treat you accordingly. Elara felt something cold settle in her stomach. Treat me how? With absolute authority. Speak for you. Make decisions for you. Punish you if you disobey. He saw her expression and continued quickly. I would never do those things. But other vampires will judge me for not doing them. Will see me as weak. And weakness in vampire politics is dangerous, so I'm a liability. You're a complication. He softened slightly. But you're also the first person in centuries I've cared enough about to accept that complication, which terrifies me more than the third house ever could. Elara stood, needing to move. The small room felt suddenly smaller. What else? What other truths am I not seeing? Kale watched her pace. The isolation. Vampires live for centuries, but we rarely form genuine connections. It's too painful watching mortals age and die. Watching other vampires become strangers as centuries reshape them. Most of us retreat into solitude. Collect things instead of people. Books, art, memories. Anything that doesn't die. Is that what you've done? For the last 200 years? Yes. He gestured at the sparse room. This is what my life looks like, Elara. Safe houses scattered across the city. Books I've read 1,000 times. The same routine repeated endlessly. Because change requires caring, and caring leads to loss. Until I came along. Until you came along, he agreed quietly. And reminded me what I've been missing. Which is why this is so cruel. Cruel. Because now I have to choose. His voice roughened. Between keeping you safe by sending you away, or keeping you close and watching you either die of old age or transform into something you'll eventually hate. There's no version of this where I don't lose you. The only question is how much it will hurt when I do. Elara stopped pacing. Through the bond, she felt the depth of his anguish, centuries of accumulated loss. Focused into this single impossible moment. You're assuming I'll leave, she said. Everyone does. Eventually. What if I don't? She moved closer. What if I choose to stay? Knowing all of this, knowing the hunger and the isolation and the weight of immortality? Then you're a fool. But his voice lacked conviction. Maybe. Elara reached for his hand again. This time he didn't pull away. Or maybe I'm someone who's already lost everything. Who has nothing left to fear from losing more. Who would rather have 50 years with you than a lifetime without you. Kale's fingers tightened around hers. 50 years is optimistic. Then 10, or 5. Or however long before one of us dies in whatever war is coming. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the coolness radiating from his skin. I'm not asking for forever, Kale. I'm asking for now. For whatever time we have. And when now ends. When age catches up to you, and you're lying in a bed dying while I watch helplessly. What then? Then you'll have had someone who chose you. Who stayed despite the danger. Who knew what you were, and loved you anyway. The word slipped out unbidden. Love. Elara felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't take it back. Cale stared at her, something like wonder breaking through his carefully maintained control. You don't know what you're saying, he whispered. I know exactly what I'm saying. She raised his hand to her cheek. I'm saying I choose this. I choose you. For however long we have. Elara. The rest of his words were lost as she rose on her toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he was frozen. Then his control shattered. His arms came around her, pulling her against him with desperate strength. His mouth moved against hers with centuries of loneliness and longing poured into a single kiss. His hands threaded through her hair, cradled her face, held her like she was something precious and breakable. Elara felt it all through the bond, his hunger, his need, his absolute terror of losing her. And underneath it all, a feeling so profound it had no name. Something older than words. Something that tasted like hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard though only one of them needed. Cale rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he whispered. Probably. I'll hurt you. Eventually. No. And you still want this? I want you. Elara pulled back enough to meet his eyes. All of you. The ancient lord and the lonely philosopher and the monster you think you are but aren't. I want every version, for as long as we have. Cale's eyes were bright impossibly, as if vampires could cry. I can't turn you. I can't give you immortality. I'm not asking for it anymore. She smiled. 50 mortal years with you is worth more than 500 lonely ones without you. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent, like he was memorizing the moment. The feel of her warmth against his coolness. The sound of her heartbeat. The taste of her mortality. 2 more nights until the council, he murmured against her lips. 2 nights to prepare. And then we fight, Elara finished. Together, he agreed. And in that small, bare room, with danger circling outside and war approaching like a storm, they held each other in the lamplight and pretended that together would be enough. Chapter 10. The Council of Blood. The council chamber was older than the city itself. Elara stood in the shadows of the gallery above, watching as the 5 house leaders gathered in the circular stone room below. Cale had brought her through hidden passages, positioned her where she could observe but remain unseen. Witnesses aren't allowed, he'd explained. But you deserve to see how this ends. Lady Cassia arrived first, draped in silver silk that caught the torchlight. She took her seat with practiced elegance, her dark eyes surveying the chamber like a queen assessing her domain. The 4th house leader came next, a broad-shouldered vampire named Victor who moved with military precision. Then the 5th, a woman called Morgana, whose presence seemed to dim the torches themselves. Cale entered last, and Elara's breath caught. He wore formal attire from another era, a long coat with silver embroidery, dark brocade, boots that reached his knees. He looked every inch the ancient lord he was, and when he took his seat, the other house leaders straightened slightly, acknowledging his age, his power. The seat for the 3rd house remained empty. Marcus is late, Cassia observed. How predictable, or strategic, Victor rumbled. Making us wait, asserting dominance. Let him try, Cale said quietly. We have the votes. As if summoned by his name, Marcus arrived. He was younger than the others, perhaps 3 centuries old, with sharp features and eyes like chips of ice. He moved with predatory grace, flanked by 2 guards who radiated menace. Lord Thorn, Marcus said, settling into his seat. I hear you've called this council to complain about a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Cale repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Is that what we're calling attempted murder now? Your donor witnessed a private transaction. My associates acted to protect house interests, by violating neutral territory, by attacking 1st house property. Cale leaned forward. You broke the accords, Marcus, multiple times. The bloodwine operation, the unauthorized feeding, and now assault on protected persons. Marcus smiled. You'll have to prove those accusations. I can. Cale produced a folder documents, Elara realized. Evidence he'd been gathering for months. Financial records showing bloodwine purchases traced to 3rd house accounts. Testimony from donors who were fed upon without consent. And 3 dead vampires who attacked my home, all bearing 3rd house marks. He slid the folder across the table. Cassia picked it up, studying the contents with growing interest. She passed it to Victor, who grunted in approval. This is substantial, Cassia said. More than substantial. This is grounds for formal sanctions. Marcus's smile didn't waver. Documents can be forged. Testimony can be bought. Dead vampires can't speak to who sent them. Are you suggesting Lord Thorn is lying? Morgana's voice was soft, deadly. I'm suggesting he's protective of his new pet. Protective enough to manufacture evidence. Marcus's gaze flicked upward directly to where Alara stood hidden in the shadows. She froze. Could he see her? The mortal, Marcus continued. She's caused quite a stir. A blood oath after centuries of solitude? How romantic. How convenient. Kale's hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. Leave her out of this. But she's already in it, isn't she? She's the witness. The reason you're so determined to destroy me. Marcus stood, pacing. Tell me. Kale, did you plan this? Find some desperate mortal. Stage an attack. Use her as an excuse to move against me? That's absurd, Victor said. Is it? Lord Thorn has been trying to shut down my operations for years. Now, suddenly he has a mortal witness and convenient evidence. Forgive me if I find the timing suspicious. Cassia's eyes narrowed. You're deflecting. I'm pointing out inconsistencies. Marcus turned to address the full council. The Accords exist to prevent exactly this one house using mortal affairs as pretense for vampire conflicts. If we allow Thorn to weaponize his donor against me, what precedent does that set? The chamber fell silent. Alara felt her stomach drop. He was good twisting the narrative, making Kale look like the aggressor. The evidence speaks for itself, Kale said coldly. Evidence provided by you. Authenticated by no one. Marcus smiled. I propose we table these accusations until an independent investigation can verify their validity. 6 months should suffice. 6 months? Victor's voice was incredulous. In 6 months, your bloodwine operation will have destabilized half the young vampires in the city. Alleged operation, Marcus corrected. Unproven. Cassia leaned back in her chair, studying both vampires. What do you propose instead, Marcus? That we simply ignore substantial accusations? I propose we remember our purpose. The Accords exist to prevent war between houses. If we allow personal vendettas or romantic entanglements to dictate policy, we've failed. He looked directly at Kale. Withdraw your accusations. I'll withdraw my associates from neutral territory. We'll call it even. Even? Kale's voice could have cut glass. Your vampires tried to kill an innocent woman, your donor, who you've marked and claimed. Hardly innocent in vampire politics, the distinction was subtle, but damning. Alara saw it register on the other council members' faces, the shift from seeing her as a victim to seeing her as Kale's possession. A piece in a larger game. Kale stood slowly. You want even? Here's even. Withdraw all third house vampires from neutral zones. Shut down the bloodwine operation. Submit to independent auditing of your activities for the next year. Do that, and I'll consider not demanding your immediate removal from the council. Marcus laughed. You don't have the votes for removal, don't I? Kale looked at each council member in turn. Cassia, you've complained about bloodwine destabilizing your younger vampires. Victor, the third house has been encroaching on fourth house territory for months. Morgana, I believe Marcus still owes you considerable debt from the last century. The silence that followed was heavy with calculation. Alara watched as each vampire reassessed, weighing old grievances against current politics. I vote for sanctions, Cassia said finally. The evidence is compelling enough to warrant action. Agreed. Victor rumbled. Morgana was quiet longer. Then, I vote for investigation. But sanctions remain in place until it's complete. 3 votes. Marcus's expression finally cracked, a flicker of genuine anger breaking through his polished facade. This is political manipulation, he said. This is justice, Kale corrected. The Accords apply to everyone. Even you. Marcus stood abruptly. You regret this, Thorn. All of you will. Is that a threat? Victor asked. It's a prediction. Marcus gestured to his guards. This council is illegitimate. I don't recognize its authority. Then you're in violation of the Accords, Cassia said calmly. Which gives us grounds for true removal proceedings. Marcus's eyes went black. For a moment, Alara thought he might attack, might throw centuries of law aside for immediate violence. But he controlled himself barely. This isn't over, he said. He strode from the chamber, his guards following. The heavy doors slammed behind them, the sound echoing like thunder. The remaining council members exhaled collectively. Well, Cassia said. That went about as badly as possible. He'll retaliate, Morgana observed. Let him try, Kale said. But Alara heard the strain in his voice. felt through the bond his sudden spike of fear. Not for himself, for her. Victor stood. I'll have my vampires monitor third house movements. If Marcus makes a move, the explosion cut him off. The chamber shook. Stone cracked. Torches fell from their sconces, plunging half the room into darkness. And from somewhere above exactly where Alara stood came the sound of shattering wood. Cale moved faster than thought. One moment he was at the table. The next he was in the gallery, arms closing around Alara as the floor beneath her gave way. They fell together through splintering wood and cascading stone. Cale twisted mid-fall, taking the impact on his back as they hit the chamber floor. His arms stayed locked around her, protecting her even as the gallery collapsed above them. Dust filled the air. Debris rained down. And through it all, Alara heard shouting, vampires moving, orders being called, the sound of running feet. Are you hurt? Cale's voice was urgent in her ear. I don't think so. You? I'll heal. He pulled them both upright, shielding her with his body as more debris fell. We need to move, now. But before they could, figures emerged from the dust. Third house vampires, dozens of them, pouring through the breach in the gallery. And at their center, smiling like a predator, stood Marcus. I did warn you, he said, that this wasn't over. Cale pushed Alara behind him, his stance protective. The other council members moved to flank them, Cassia with inhuman grace, Victor with military precision, Morgana wreathed in shadows. This is madness, Cassia called. Attacking the council chamber? You will have every house against you. I'll have what I've always deserved, Marcus said. Power. And I'll start by taking away the one thing Cale values most. His eyes locked on Alara, and hell erupted in the chamber.